A very fascinating investigative report came out on Tuesday regarding NFL owners, player contracts, fully guaranteed money, and some big time quarterbacks around the NFL. We're going to break it down here today. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Wednesday, June 25 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. Yesterday was a Tuesday. We had our special Spotlight guest of the week. For the first time ever, we had an agent here on the show. AJ Stevens, the VP of Client Strategy for Athletes First, was our guest. He is somebody who is involved with Athletes First, one of the biggest agencies in the world, regardless of sport, and they have some of the biggest contracts in the NFL, which AJ is directly involved in, including Dak Prescott, Derrick Henry, Derek Stingley, over the years, Aaron Donald, and many, many, many other players around the NFL. If you have not listened to that episode, go back one episode and check it out. As for today, we're kind of sticking to the business side of football on today's episode. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? It's great to see you.
What's going on, Ari? Yeah, a little bit of a more deep dive today into a very interesting story that I don't think was necessarily picked up by a lot of the media circuits. And quite frankly, I have a whole lot of questions about, because it has to do with the opportunity for there to be collusion in the NFL, something that I think a lot of people wonder is happening, but you don't necessarily hear a whole lot about it. Pablo Torre and Mike Florio did a very good episode on Tuesday on Pablo Torre Finds Out, kind of breaking down a very interesting story that goes back to 2022 regarding contract guarantees, veterans. It has a little bit to do with Lamar Jackson, a little bit to do with Russell Wilson. I really need you to lay it out here for us, Ari. What exactly is this story? Does it matter? Does it not matter? And what does it mean for the league as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many layers to this, and I do recommend people to go check out Pablo Torre Finds Out and go check out that entire episode and all the articles that have been written. But we're going to try to break down some of the key points that I kind of gathered from all of this. But in essence, the NFLPA, the Players Association, they alleged that the NFL and their owners basically colluded to limit guaranteed compensation in player contracts. And this is primarily after the Cleveland Browns traded for Deshaun Watson, gave up 3 first-round picks, and then also gave him an unprecedented 5-year, $230 million contract with every single dollar and penny fully guaranteed no matter what. And if you remember back then, there was a lot of panic among NFL owners and executives because this truly was something that had never been seen before in the NFL. If you recall, there was a lot of reporting back then that a bunch of other owners at the owners' meetings literally gave the cold shoulder to Browns owner Jimmy Haslam because they were so upset at him doing that. So the NFL Management Council, which includes, Roger Goodell is part of that as well. Basically, they told ownership that this cannot continue. And at the time, there were 3 big-time quarterbacks who needed contract extensions around the NFL. Those 3 quarterbacks were Russell Wilson, who got traded to the Denver Broncos. We had Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and we also had Kyler Murray in Arizona, who had just finished his 3rd year in the NFL. And it was basically made clear that Deshaun Watson contract better be made into an outlier over here. And the great investigative reporting here that we have goes into detail on all of those situations and what was said. And we'll give a couple of the examples. But for example, Kyler Murray, his agent, Eric Burkhardt, he wanted a fully guaranteed deal. Michael Bidwell, the owner, was, texting with the GM at the time, Steve Keim, and was like, there's no way we're ever going to do that. And Keim essentially said, I'm baffled that the Browns even did that in the first place. And Bidwell basically told them, we're going to add all these incentives to make sure he gets that money, and it's not going to be fully guaranteed. Eventually, they did that big extension. It was not fully guaranteed. And if you recall, some of the crazy incentives or guidelines in that contract were he had to, quote unquote, do his homework and not play too many video games. Like there was some crazy stuff in that contract. And after it was done, Michael Bidwell, the owner of the Cardinals, got a text message from Dean Spanos, who's the owner of the Chargers, basically saying, "Great job on that contract." And Spanos said, we were never, Bidwell said we would never do a fully guaranteed deal. Spanos said, "Great job. This will help us at this time next year when we have to extend our quarterback," which ended up being Justin Herbert a year later. So that was one case. Another case here, of course, we all remember the Lamar Jackson situation, who quite literally played all 5 years of his rookie deal. And in text messages between Lamar Jackson and the GM, Eric DeCosta, Lamar made it very clear that I am not accepting any offer that is not fully guaranteed, because he saw what Deshaun Watson got. Deshaun Watson, of course, had all those allegations on him, and he was traded to a new team, and he got this crazy 5 year deal. $230 million, $46 million per year, top of the market, every dollar guaranteed. Lamar was coming off an MVP season and all that. He was like, well, I don't have any off the field stuff. I've been an MVP. I've been a better quarterback. I should get that as well. Ends up not happening, plays out the 5th year of his contract. As we all remember, he essentially was set to become a free agent, and the Ravens placed the franchise tag on him, and he still was allowed to go out there and see what the market offered him. And if he accepted an offer from a different team and the Ravens didn't match, Baltimore would have gotten 2 first-round picks, and Lamar would have gone to a different team. But this is one of the great mysteries around the NFL that we've had for the last couple of years. Literally no team around the NFL made any contact with Lamar Jackson. Not the Falcons, not the Raiders, not the Panthers. None of those teams the year before who were trying to get Deshaun Watson made any contact with him. And that was bizarre because Lamar Jackson, of course, is one of the best quarterbacks in football, already had an MVP under his resume, was obviously still very young, would bring ticket sales, would bring jersey sales, would do everything an organization wants. And of course, we know how hard it is to find the quarterback in the NFL. And you have this guy basically out there for you to at least negotiate with, and nobody did anything. And it was pretty well known. And now we know that around league circles, owners knew we are not going to do the fully guaranteed deal that Lamar Jackson wants. We would never do that. None of us are going to set that precedent. And as a result, Lamar was basically stuck with only one team, and that was Baltimore. And of course, eventually, he does do a 5 year extension, but it was not fully guaranteed, and his deal eventually got done. The last example, of course, was Russell Wilson, who I know Russell Wilson not the same quarterback he once was anymore, but at the time, he was just traded from the Seattle Seahawks to the Denver Broncos, and they gave up a lot to get him. And at the time, Russell Wilson had 2 more years left on his contract, and he wanted a new deal as well. It's actually interesting because in the reporting here, it's mentioned that Russell Wilson actually was looking for a 7 year, fully guaranteed contract at $50 million per season. And he actually thought it was going to happen. And the interesting thing about Russell Wilson is that he, of course, was traded. He, of course, was going to a situation where they wanted him. They gave up a lot of picks to get him. They thought he was still the same Russell Wilson as he was in Seattle. So he had a lot of leverage in all of this. And his agent is this guy named Mark Rogers, who only has one football client. It is Russell Wilson. So he has been pretty, aggressive in negotiations, knowing that his relationships with other teams around the NFL, it's not like he has other NFL clients. This is his only NFL client. So he could have been a little bit hard over here. But the Broncos kind of got some cold feet about doing that deal. At the same time, the Broncos also had an ownership change, and that was, Greg Penner came in, and the Walton Group came in, Walmart, of course, and they were like, why do we have to do this big, fully guaranteed deal when he still has 2 more years left on his contract? Why not, at the very minimum, either do a regular contract structure, or let's just wait 1 more year and see what he does over here? And of course, once Russell Wilson and his agent realized that there's a scenario here where we don't get any extension, they just did the regular standard extension as well, and locking him in with this very, very big deal, which of course turned out to be not so great for the team eventually, but it could have been way worse if it was fully guaranteed. But all in all, this story basically confirms what we all always thought. NFL owners, management council, they're always talking to each other and basically working with each other, which is not the way it's supposed to be because these 32 teams are supposed to be all their own entity. And that essentially is not the case over here. In the end, the PA did lose this case. I'm not going to get into the reasons behind all of that. Again, go check out all the other reporting for the big time details into all of this. But this essentially confirms what we've known for a long time. And seeing these owners basically text each other and all those details, it is some fascinating, fascinating stuff.
But like kind of like you said, to a certain level, and excuse my French, it's like no shit the owners don't want to be paying these fully guaranteed contracts to all these guys in the league. So if we all kind of already knew that and we all figure, I mean, we're not naive to this. Players are talking to, manager GMs and stuff before they're supposed to be. There's all this kind of stuff going on. There's all these back end conversations already happening. We know these owners are talking to each other. What's the actual importance to this story then, particularly since the NFLPA did not win? Like, what do we as fans of the league, what should we be taking away from a story like this?
So there's a few things. First of all, just the potential of the damages here had the NFLPA won. It could have been significant in terms of how much money owners could have been in limbo for with all of this. So that element of it, of course, is the first thing that we got to mention over here. But you look around over here, I think this is also something where I think if you go back, agents, they should have done a better job over here. When the Watson deal happened, there should have been a more aggressive push by these agents with those quarterbacks to try to get another fully guaranteed deal somewhere else because that was probably the best opportunity they had when it came to all of this. And of course, all three of those ended up flopping. Lamar Jackson didn't even have an agent, but he was trying to do it on his own. But I look at that part of it, that's interesting. But also, you look ahead over here to there's going to be another CBA negotiation at some point here. Obviously, we know about the 18th game element. The CBA expires in the 2030s, but we've heard a lot about Roger Goodell. There's a new NFLPA president, which is Lloyd Howell, which is also brought up in the investigation by Pablo and Mike. That's another entire deep dive, which is another fascinating topic about how he got the job and JC Tretter's involvement with all of that. There's a lot of stuff over here in this investigative reporting, which is very interesting. But because there's going to be another CBA here at some point, and because obviously the players want more money, they want more fully guaranteed deals, they see all these different things. I think knowing the fact that this collusion stuff happens, I do wonder, is there anything that the union is going to do to try to take that next step over here and essentially try to change things over here when it comes to the way the NFL salary cap system and those type of things work right now across the league. I don't know where it goes. We just know this has been going on, but seeing it actually in text and seeing how they work over here, where you feel like every single team should keep this stuff close to the vest. Nobody else knows. We're trying to win, Super Bowls and whatever, and we're going to try to get all the edges we have over here. To see all these owners actually talking to each other and see it in actual text over here, it's obviously very, very interesting. And also the other element of it, of course, is the fact that Lamar was available the way he was, and some of these owners out there. Again, if you get Lamar Jackson, you become a pretty good team in the NFL, I would say, right? Atlanta Falcon at the time, they needed a quarterback. It made a lot of sense. Arthur Blank basically said his playing style could cause injury, and as a result, it wouldn't necessarily work, and it could be a bad contract for us. That is him just making up stuff because owners were told, do not pursue this. I mean, that is not a great situation. If you're a fan, that is also just disturbing, I would say. So there's a lot of moving parts with all of this. I'm curious to see where this goes. For the owner's sake, it's probably annoying to them this came out right now because this is quite literally the dead time of the offseason. And this is potentially going to become a headline for the next couple of weeks until football ramps back up. The other element of it that's also very interesting to me, at least, we know Lamar Jackson needs an extension in Baltimore right now. I wonder him seeing all this, what he thinks about all of it, and is he going to once again
try to stamp his approval over here and say, all right, I'm going to get a fully guaranteed deal now because I actually see the full portrait over here of what happened the last go around, not just with me, but among all the owners and some other players over here as well. So he needs a new extension. They could definitely keep on playing on his current deal, but eventually he's going to need a new deal. He's still at the top of his game. That element of it as well, we'll see if Lamar ever decides to speak on it. But I think that's also a very interesting wrinkle into all of this as well.
Well, he's going to get asked about it no matter what, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if he doesn't want to necessarily talk about it or bring it up himself, he's going to get questions.
I mean, he will. And the last time he was asked, which was about a week ago when he had mandatory minicamp, when he was asked about his contract, he basically said, we are not talking about this right now. And the only thing he kind of told us was highest paid player in football sounds good. I don't know how much Lamar actually knew in all of this that came out. Obviously, he knew about his communication with Eric DaCosta. There's a very interesting wrinkle as well in all of this where apparently the microphone in his phone was not working, which as a result made communication even harder. I don't know about all of that, but there's a lot of details in this entire story. But Lamar, I'm sure Lamar knew at the time that teams were basically teaming up over here not to pursue him because it made zero sense that you got no calls at all, especially when the year before there were teams, the four teams at the time were the Saints, the Panthers, the Falcons, and the Browns, who were all pursuing Deshaun Watson and all were willing to give up 2 or 3 first round picks plus a very big contract. At the very next year, nobody wanted Lamar Jackson. Clearly, he knew something was up. He did say later on that he only wanted to stay in Baltimore. He never wanted to leave. That was more of a strategy by him. But for all these details to actually come out now and for him to see that in text and to know everything these owners said publicly was essentially just a bunch of word salad, I would imagine that probably disturbs him a little bit.
So obviously there are other investigators, investigative journalists like Pablo Torre, but he has been very much in the news lately for doing these deep dives. This is why he has this podcast. That's why he's good at these sort of things. If this has been linked to him, will this now become something that people go, oh, well, this is interesting? Do you imagine there might be more documents on the way, more of these kind of stories that are going to get out there? And if that's the case, should the NFL be afraid?
Listen, I do believe that there are a lot of, I guess, hidden stuff out there within the NFL. I mean, the Washington Commanders emails, which only the John Gruden stuff came out, we still never saw everything else. I mean, I don't know what else was in there, but that stuff was all hidden. So there's a lot of things out there that if Pablo could get his hands on it, um, good for him because I am curious. This isn't the type of stuff that the traditional NFL, reporters out there are kind of chasing. But Pablo, and maybe we'll get Pablo here on the show here in the near future to talk about all of it. He really makes an effort to go out of his way and go down these rabbit holes and do real journalism and find out some stuff. And there's a lot of things out there that we truly, truly don't know around the NFL. This is a great example. Did we know this stuff was happening? Yeah, we knew. But again, actually seeing it and seeing all the text and seeing the 62 pages that he put out, that's fascinating stuff. And hearing all the behind the scenes, it's very, very interesting. So I don't know what right now NFL 345 Park Avenue is thinking. It's interesting to think about, are they trying to tighten up some stuff? Are they wondering how on earth this got out? The union, for what it's worth, also didn't want this to get out because they lost this thing. But it's a very, very interesting element over here that he was able to get it and basically put it out there and do the deep dive. And there's a lot more things over here that will be interesting. But the NFL, again, it's very clear. The NFL owners, management council, Roger Goodell, they basically went out of their way to tell teams, you guys are screwing things up and you better fix this right now. And NFL owners got straight and they basically said, we're not doing this. And they all came together and made sure it never happened again. And they were very successful. So that's the crux of all of this. But I'll recommend everybody because Pablo does such a great job to go check it out and see the work that he did because it's really, really interesting.
So, with all this being said, Ari, there's obviously going to be now a little bit of a focus with this whole idea of will we see guaranteed contracts now that this quote unquote negative press has gotten out? Do you imagine that even people like our guest from yesterday, Agent Stevens, they're going to change the approach in which they have to these contract discussions with teams, having that little bit of an element of like, hey, you guys, you might owe us one here. People know now that you guys are colluding to not do this. Do you think that becomes a little bit of a negotiation tactic? And do you imagine that agents are going to start pressing for this more often again?
I don't know if it necessarily becomes a negotiating tactic, but you mentioned the guest that we had yesterday, AJ Stevens, and one of the things that we've seen happen more and more around the NFL is these shorter term contracts, which teams don't want to give out those fully guaranteed deals. They don't want to do that. It's not happening right now. Deshaun Watson is truly the only one to get it in the NFL on such a big contract. But you look around the league, there's more cases of those 3-year deals, 4-year deals, which essentially gets you another bite of the apple over here after that contract is nearing the end. And there used to be a time where players would do those 6-year deals, 7-year deals, 10-year deals, and essentially the player is locked into his deal and there is no way out of it. And as AJ said yesterday, once the guaranteed portion of the contract is over, the remaining years on the deal is essentially a bunch of team options. And the market keeps on going up, the cap keeps on going up, there's more money to spend, and you're stuck on that contract. So that is one of the things that we've seen agents push for more, and we've seen teams apply with it more here in recent history. Of course, we mentioned the big Derek Stingley deal from this offseason, 3 years, $90 million. That is a perfect example. Dak Prescott always getting 4-year contract. Another very, very great example of a player during those shorter term deals getting back to the market and getting more money. Because again, those back end years of a contract, if you don't have fully guaranteed deals, you're essentially on non-guaranteed, and those are essentially team options. So that is one thing that we've seen more of over here in the NFL. We've also seen more of these rolling guarantee structures, which you get more years on the contract. So whenever we see a 5-year deal, 6-year deal, 7-year deal, whenever that does happen, in those scenarios, especially with quarterbacks, what ends up happening is the first couple of years are fully guaranteed no matter what. But moving forward, year 3, year 4 becomes fully guaranteed, and in year 4, year 5 becomes fully guaranteed. So at least you're able to go a year in advance on some of this. And all of that also, there's a whole bigger discussion with all of this when it comes to the funding rule and owners having to put money in escrow. Essentially, any money that is fully guaranteed in a contract, the NFL still has this funding rule, which really should go away, but it's there because the owners like it, where that money must go into escrow. And as a result, a lot of these owners and these teams and these cap gurus essentially tell agents that, listen, our owner doesn't have this much cash on hand to put into escrow. So as a result, we're going to use these injury guarantees instead, which are basically practically guaranteed, but not fully guaranteed. But as a result, that money doesn't have to go into escrow. So there's a lot of discussion that could be had over here when it comes to this entire topic. Like I mentioned before, there's going to be a new CBA at some point. There's a new director of the PA. There's a lot of moving parts over there. We really don't know how this guy negotiates, what he actually wants. That could be a whole episode in itself. But whenever that time does come, I would imagine the union, knowing all of this and obviously having this on paper now, they're going to try to push for some very, very specific things. And of course, the league is going to push for their own very, very specific things. So whenever that time comes, we'll obviously have that discussion eventually. But there are ripple effects galore to all of this. And I do believe, Ben, we're going to have some guests here on the show in the near future to talk about some of this stuff as well, because we kind of could do multiple episodes on this if we really wanted to.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll obviously continue to monitor this story, as I imagine there's going to be. Do you think we'll maybe get some statements from the league or something like that? Or do you think they just kind of try to keep this quiet?
I'd be surprised. I don't think they even want to acknowledge this. If
Okay.
I would be surprised if they do. We'll see if the PA has anything. The PA also, again, even though the PA sort of looks good in this, but if you watch the full episode, they also kind of look bad in all of this. So there's really a lot over here where not everybody is fully satisfied with the story. But when you dive deep into it, there are some parts of the NFL who are, oh, look at this, we told you. And there's other parts of here where it's like, look at this, we told you about that. So there's a lot over here. And again, I don't expect anybody to acknowledge it. As we've seen to this point, none of the other major outlets have even reported on it since it came out. They've been also just, I don't know if they're just on summer vacation or whatever, but this is a story that everyone is trying to keep under the rug, but it's out there right now, and here we are talking about it.
And I'll make sure we link to the discussion that Pablo Torre and Mike Florio had on Pablo Torre Finds Out. Definitely worth the listen, worth the watch. And while you guys are clicking through that stuff on our page, make sure you guys are subscribed to us as well. We have a lot of new viewers coming in, watching the daily or watching the big guest episodes we have. We'd love for you guys to be watching along on our daily episodes as well. YouTube, Apple, Spotify, the whole shebang. Ari, let's keep an eye out for this story and see where it progresses. But for today, I think that's all we got.
Yeah, that would do it here for our Wednesday, June 25 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. A very, very unique show here today. I mean, you have owners, you have the union, you have all these big time people over here, and stuff getting out that they probably never wanted out. So very, very interesting for sure. And we will talk more about it over here in the future as well. We will be back here tomorrow morning to talk more about the NFL and whatever else is happening around the league. We will see you then.